Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Open Line. Glad you were with us on this Tuesday night. We are talking about elder law. We have with us elder law attorney Barbara Boone McGinnis. She's joining us via Zoom from Hendersonville. Takis McGinnis, law office is there. And I wanted to ask, as far as COVID, aside from this interview, which is being done via Zoom, how is it impacting your business? How is it impacting how you do things, and how all of us need to be thinking as far as, elder law planning?
Right. So our office is actually open now, but we did spend about 17 weeks working from home, and all of our work, whether it was staff meetings or meetings with family members, was all via a Zoom platform. Now we're in our new office space, and part of what's really nice about it is we do have the physical space to have in-person meetings and social distance in the same room. When staff are together in an office, we do wear a mask of some sort and face coverings of some kind. And if clients come into the office, we do the temperature screening and the screening questionnaires, but welcome people to come in and wear their face coverings, and we can have an in-person meeting. But I'd say about 50% of our meetings remain virtual meetings, where people just have embraced the convenience of the virtual tools that we have, whether it's because of distance or whether it's just because they feel more comfortable doing it from their home instead of coming in and being around other people. I was showing you our this new mask that we have, the face covering that's clear, and it's nice for folks that because a lot of our clients that are harder of hearing, they really need to see your mouth move, and this allows that to happen.
I haven't seen that mask before. I like that. Yeah, that's a big help.
I do too.
All right, let's go to Patricia here. Hello, Patricia.
Yeah.
Go right ahead. What's on your mind? Patricia, go right ahead.
Patricia, go right ahead. Patricia, go right ahead. Patricia, go.
Might have lost Patricia. Well, okay, too bad. All right, how much do you think this is going to change what you do going forward? I mean, what we've experienced, how is it going to be around maybe long after the virus is gone?
Right. I can't imagine that it's not the most intense incentive for people to put their affairs in order, so to speak, and try to we have all these motion sensors on our lights, so I didn't move enough. My light just went out in my office.
We have that in my office too. Not in my house, but in my office, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of a cool feature, but now I walk around my house wondering why the lights aren't coming on in my house when I walk in. It's a great incentive, I would think, for people to get their affairs in order, because it has just thrown it in everyone's face that life is fragile and we do not know what our future holds. We do have what we call a fast track service, where we're trying to help people that have fairly simple estate plans expedite their estate plan, and it's at a reduced cost because it's a more simple plan. It's a simpler plan, right? Where a lot of our folks that come to us, they're not necessarily of great wealth, but perhaps a good bit of complexity. So I think it's really a motivation. I think that's how it's going to impact our industry the most, is that people need to plan ahead, not just for their estate plan, but for their care plan throughout their elder care continuum. Where do they want to be receiving care? What do they expect out of a facility? I think that industry is going to change on a huge paradigm, how long-term care is conducted in the United States. There's just no way that we will accept on a prolonged basis not being able to visit our family members in a long-term care facility.
Right. Which is happening.
Where does that
right?
Where does that even sound like that's remotely accessible? I mean, acceptable. In the name of safety, you can't visit your parents. You can't visit your grandparents except through a window or on a FaceTime screen. And I think that is detrimental to their health not because of neglect, not because they're not getting good care, but because at that stage of life, they need to, their family members need to be a part of their daily life, especially if somebody who has some cognitive impairment, right? I mean, they don't know, they don't understand why they're separated.
Mm-hmm. What is this going to do to how people choose a nursing home, in your opinion?
I think it will delay people wanting to make that move, as long as, you know, a lot of times people say, for as long as possible, we're going to keep them at home. But I think we're going to redefine what as long as possible now, because the alternative becomes that much more unattractive. It's not just expensive. It's not just the dreaded nursing home, right? It's I can't be with that person anymore. To place them means I have to give up visitation. That becomes a new high barrier. You know, my mom was in a facility. I think she received really good care, but it was really hard on her to not have that social interaction with family.
Yeah, I bet. And that's still going on, right? I mean, in many places.
Absolutely. No end in sight. Yeah. No real end in sight. Because there's no real end in sight to coronavirus right now. I mean, the virus is still with us until we have vaccines that are widely available. And, you know, it could be many more months.
Let's go back to Patricia. I believe Patricia's there.
Okay.
Hello, Patricia. Oh boy, Patricia, turn down your TV and tell us what's on your mind.
Okay. We have a will, and we have powers of attorney and medical powers of attorney in place for a long, long time. And everything is supposed, you know, hopefully done the right way. And my only question is, when should we switch to do a not a will, but the or I lost my thought. What change it? If you turn all your assets over to your children and sign one of those like a it's not powers of attorney, but it's not people get that. It's not a will. It's the other one.
They basically sign stuff over to your children. Is that what you're asking?
Right there, it's you put all of your assets under one log type thing.
That would give it to your children when you're gone or before you're.
Right, when we're gone, but if we get where we can't handle it, because they have the power to already do that. I forgot. It's also a state plan thing, but it's not a will. It's we've been talked to a group one time about it.
Would it be a trust?
A trust is what I'm trying to think of.
Okay,
not
very good.
The word. I had it in my mind before you asked what I went ready to say. What would be the benefit of a trust over a will?
Okay, thank you. All right. What about that?
Well, Patricia, that was a hard way to get there, but that turned out to be a great question. The difference between a trust and a will, and what would be the benefit of one over another. A will allows your assets to pass according to your direction at your death through the court probate process. Up until that time, you're either in control of your assets or you have a power of attorney that has some authority to manage those assets for you. Now, they're fully accountable and fully exposed to creditors, including long-term care creditors. A trust, and there's many different kinds of trusts. Perhaps the most basic trust and the most well-known type of trust is called a revocable living trust. You create it during your lifetime. It's revocable. You as the grantor can make changes, including just revoking it, tearing it up, and during your lifetime. That primary purpose of a revocable trust is to avoid the probate process. You can also, sometimes you will use it because you can also insert maybe some conditions or contingency plans upon your remainder beneficiaries. So the people that ultimately receive your assets, you could put, if you can't get it until you're a certain age, or you can't get it if you're taking drugs, or you can't get it if you didn't go to college, you can put some conditions and contingencies in there. The other thing a revocable trust will let you do is asset management during your life, but when you become incapacitated, you can name a successor trustee or an alternate trustee that can manage your assets for you. Ownership really doesn't change until you as the grantor pass away. So it would be you and your spouse pass away, then ownership would pass on to your children. Now, irrevocable trust, you could name your children to be the beneficiaries of an irrevocable trust. That is almost like people love to give their house or their land or some sort of property to their children during their lifetime because they think it's a great idea. It's really not a great idea, but you can use a trust to help bridge that gap between it becomes an almost complete gift to your children, and you still hold some strings attached in terms of how that property could be used, when it will be completely theirs, what creditors are exposed. So those are some of the ways that a trust can be used and how it can make your estate planning more efficient than just a will-based estate plan.
Okay, that's very good. And that's a question we get a lot. And number one, I know Tim Takis comes on here and says it's a terrible idea to give things away to your children because he's not a fan of that. And says that
none of us here are.
Nobody is. Yeah. So what if the child gets divorced and suddenly half of what you have could be divided, or something terrible happens and they're sued, and then all of a sudden, those assets are taken away. So people think, I'm going to give this to my children. They're very responsible. They're great. It will prevent, nursing homes from getting it or some other thing. But you have a whole other set of issues.
So that's exactly what motivates people to come in and ask that question, because they think, if I give my house, my farm, my land, whatever, to my child or children now, I don't have to worry about that being an asset attached and used for long-term care expenses. And they're assuming the only risk out there for creditors or for attachment is the risk of that future long-term care expense. And they're not thinking about all the things you just mentioned. Like, even the people that look to be happily married now, we all know someone like that's had a surprise divorce come in the picture, or a terrible medical diagnosis that's caused creates medical debt problems, or all kinds of terrible things that you can think of. And the more people that own that piece of property, the higher the risk pool becomes. So it's really a terrible idea. Even if you've got great kids, it's a terrible idea.
Right. Okay. All right. We have a few calls here. Let's go to Mike. Hello, Mike. Go right ahead.
Hey, good evening, Ben, and good evening to the attorney. I just wanted her to answer a question for me. I've had parents who were sick. Both of them have passed. And one of the things I noticed here is that Tennessee ranks in like the top 20 of one of the worst places you want to be if you are old and are sick. And I wanted to ask you about that. Also, why doesn't Adult Protective Services do a better job? When they need to be zealous, they're overzealous. When they need to be proactive, they're not. And I think it's a shame that we've had the people who have died from COVID who were in nursing homes. And what's the accountability to those administrators who tried to keep it quiet? And I think it was in Madison. I'll hang up and listen. You guys have a good night.
All right, Mike. I'm writing down all your questions here. So you had 3 questions. So thank you. All right, accountability to nursing homes. There's some legal questions there. But accountability, Adult Protective Services, and Tennessee's rank as far as a place to be when you're getting older and you're in poor health. But what about accountability at nursing homes? We'll start with that one.
That's actually a fascinating topic to talk about, and I know that people could weigh in on both sides of the equation there. Accountability in nursing home, and I think just as society as a whole, we have learned and grown in our response to the COVID pandemic from when it first started in March to now. And, our responses have changed. Remember, we weren't wearing face coverings at all. Then we did, and then it became, all kinds of things have changed. We had to wash everything down before we touched it, and now it doesn't pass that way. And I think the nursing homes have had to make a lot of quick adaptations. Some of them are large bureaucrats, and it's in and of itself because they're corporations, and it's hard to make quick changes. I think they've been very costly changes for the nursing home industry, to the protective personal equipment that they've had to first find, then pay for, use, educate staff, and you've got the most vulnerable. And I think that's why they perhaps are on the now overly cautious side of no visitation, no, the windows can't be open at all, is because they're so afraid of germs getting, or the virus getting into their building. I think a lot of the early on perhaps could have been a knowledge deficit in how they responded. Now it's an evolving knowledge base in how we respond and the testing that's happening. I think it's a real mixed bag whether or not you want to actually pin them as being liable. They certainly are accountable ultimately for the health and welfare of their residents, but I think it's going to come down to a individual situation, whether or not we've got negligence, gross negligence, whether we have coincidence and unfortunate circumstances, and then the whole idea of immunity based on, from a state level, unless there is just this disregard and wanton disregard for information, which I've not heard of any facility really doing that. APS, unfortunately, is another government service that is understaffed and underfunded, and I won't say undertrained, but I think they're just very limited. They are not the panacea that people would hope them to be.
And that's adult protective services. What is the goal there?
That it's that older people, vulnerable adults, so it could be someone that's not necessarily elderly, a vulnerable adult, that they are free from abuse and neglect, even self-neglect. That includes financial exploitation as well as physical, sexual, emotional abuse. They can investigate in facilities or in the community. One of the toughest things that I think the adult protective services people face is in a community setting, when you have a situation of self-neglect, and see adults' right to accept risk and to say how they're going to live, and if they don't want help, but they're able to articulate that, then the APS people have to walk away from that and say they have that right to make that decision. Now, if you're talking about somebody that's incapacitated and they really are not able to formulate that kind of decision, that's a different story.
But that's one of those government agencies that could use more funding for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yeah. All right, that's a good question. All right, we're going to take a break. I want to come back and ask about Tennessee being a tough place to be old and in poor health that was asked by Mike. We'll also take another call from Ricky. Take a break. Be back right after this.